Imagine waking up one morning and reading this headline. China just activated 10 private rocket companies simultaneously, and they are all going after SpaceX. Not one, not two, 10. All at the same time, all chasing the same target. And the part that nobody is talking about? SpaceX does not have a direct answer yet. This is not some distant warning. This is not a projection or a forecast. This is happening right now, in 2026. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this might be the most underreported story in the entire space industry. Let us get into it. What actually happened? So let us break this down, because the story is bigger than the headline, and the headline is already enormous. For years, China's space program was essentially a state monopoly. Government money, government rockets, government timelines. Private companies technically existed, but they operated in a legal gray zone. No clear rules, no real path forward. Tolerated, but not built for. Then, in November 2025, that changed completely. China's National Space Administration, CNSA, did something no country had ever done before. They created a dedicated national-level department specifically for private space companies. Not a committee, not a task force, a full government department, the first of its kind anywhere in the world. Alongside it, they released a 2025 to 2027 action plan, with 22 specific measures designed to turbocharge private space. The numbers that followed are striking. Over 600 private space companies operating in China as of 2026. In 2025 alone, those private firms raised 18.6 billion yuan, up 32% year over year. And roughly half of all China's orbital launches in 2025 came from private companies. That is not a startup scene, that is an industry, and the government just handed it a turbo button. The bureaucratic earthquake. Here is the part that Western media almost completely missed, and it is actually the most important part of this story. Most people see the words government regulation and immediately tune out. That is a serious mistake here, because what CNSA just put in place was not bureaucratic paperwork. It was a strategic declaration of economic war on the Western commercial space market. Think about what the action plan actually unlocks. Private companies can now independently apply for satellite frequencies and orbital slots from the ITU, the international body that controls who gets access to space. Before this, only state-owned enterprises could do that. Now, private firms can. Commercial companies can bid on government space missions, the equivalent of China's NASA contracts opening to private bidders. A 100 billion yuan national venture fund targeting aerospace was activated. And the Hainan commercial space launch site is being expanded with a dedicated private facility. No queue behind state missions. No waiting for the government to clear the pad. Put those pieces together. Private companies now have money, legal status, orbital access, and their own launch infrastructure. And here is the geopolitical layer. China's 15th five-year plan classifies commercial space as a strategic industrial cluster. This funding does not depend on an election cycle. There is no administration change that reverses it. SpaceX has navigated 3 different US administrations with 3 different priorities. Chinese companies right now will never face that problem. Meet the 5 little dragons. Now let us talk about the actual companies, because this is where it gets genuinely wild. The industry has a nickname for the top 5 private rocket firms in China, the 5 little dragons. Combined valuation as of early 2026, over 100 billion yuan, roughly 14 billion US dollars. All 5 are racing toward IPOs on China's star market, and almost all of them are building toward the same goal: a reusable rocket that can do what Falcon 9 does. Dragon number 1, Landspace. Landspace is the frontrunner. They made history as the first company anywhere in the world to put a methane oxygen rocket into orbit, before SpaceX's Starship had completed its own orbital flights. Their rocket is the Zhouke 3. In December 2025, they launched it, reached orbit, but failed the first stage landing attempt. That sounds discouraging until you remember that SpaceX failed their first 4 Falcon 9 landing attempts too. Landspace has already filed for their IPO, targeting a raise of around 1 billion US dollars. They have accumulated losses exceeding $500 million, and they do not care. Because this is a war of attrition, and they have state backing that absorbs those losses as the price of admission. Dragon number 2, CAS Space. CAS Space spun directly out of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, meaning they started with access to China's best aerospace engineers and institutional IP from day one. They run 2 rockets, a solid fuel workhorse already in active service, and a liquid fuel reusable rocket in development. They are actually ahead of Landspace in the IPO process, targeting a $600 million raise. Dragon number 3, iSpace, Interstellar Glory. iSpace raised 5 billion yuan in a single funding round in early 2026, a private space record in China. Their valuation jumped 50% in one transaction. They have since pivoted from solid rockets to pure liquid fuel architecture, because reusability is where the money is, and everyone in this race knows it. Dragon number 4, Tianbing Technology. Tianbing Technology is building the Tianlong 3. Design goals match Falcon 9's performance specifications almost exactly. Not trying to out-innovate SpaceX, trying to undercut them on price and scale until the math becomes impossible to compete with. Dragon number 5, Galaxy Power. And Galaxy Power might be the most underrated company in this group. Their Series 1 has launched 22 times with 20 successes, a 90.9% success rate. SpaceX's Falcon 9 sits above 99%, but SpaceX had 10 years and billions in NASA contracts to get there. Galaxy Power is on mission 22. The Starship clone. Nobody is talking about. But forget the 5 dragons for a second, because there is a 6th company doing something so audacious, it made engineers on both sides stop and pay attention. Meet Yushi Space. Founded in May 2024, less than 2 years ago. They just raised 500 million yuan, and their plan is completely straightforward. Build a Chinese Starship. They call it the AS1. The similarities are not a coincidence. Stainless steel body, same material choice as SpaceX, same reasons. Cheaper and better heat resistance for reuse. Liquid oxygen and methane engines. Identical propellant combination to SpaceX's Raptors. A chopstick-style catch-arm recovery system. The same concept SpaceX uses to catch the Super Heavy booster. Target cost of 20,000 yuan per kilogram to orbit, roughly 1/6 of China's current average. Payload capacity of 15.7 tons to low Earth orbit. The outer shell is less than a millimeter thick. Engineers describe the welding process as welding paper. And here is the detail that reframes everything. Yushi Space did not go looking for aerospace engineers. They recruited welders from China's high-speed rail industry, people who specialize in assembling train cars, industrial workers who build things at scale, repeatedly, without drama. Because in China, building a rocket is starting to look a lot like building a train. Industrial, mass-produced, repeatable. That is the exact same philosophy that originally made SpaceX dangerous to Boeing and Lockheed Martin. The Constellation War. Now you might be thinking, these are impressive companies. But SpaceX has thousands of Starlink satellites in orbit, millions of paying subscribers, and a decade of operational experience. How does any of this actually catch up? Here is the answer. In late 2025, China filed applications with the ITU for over 203,000 satellite slots. There are currently around 10,000 active satellites in orbit total, globally from every country and company combined. China just applied for 20 times that. The 1,000 sales constellation alone accounts for over 15,000 of those slots. The state-backed Guowang broadband constellation adds another 12,992. And Galaxy Space has built a satellite manufacturing facility in Taizhou, where they can produce a single satellite in 28 days. Even if China builds a fraction of what they have applied for, they will reshape who controls low Earth orbit. And this is not simply about internet access. In February 2026, Galaxy Space signed a deal with Thailand's True Corporation to bring Starlink-style broadband to rural Southeast Asia. Remember when Starlink became a crucial part of battlefield communications in Ukraine? That moment created a question governments around the world are still sitting with. Do you really want one American billionaire controlling the satellite infrastructure your country's national security depends on? China is answering that question loudly, deliberately, and with a specific audience in mind. More deals like Thailand are coming. This is how China builds what analysts are calling the digital Silk Road in space. SpaceX's real problem. Now, I want to be fair. Because this is not a story about SpaceX being finished. It is a story about SpaceX facing something it has never faced before. Here is what SpaceX still has that no Chinese company comes close to. Falcon 9 boosters have been reused over 100 times each. No Chinese company has landed a single orbital-class booster yet. SpaceX launched 165 missions in 2025 alone. The entire Chinese space program, government and private combined, completed around 100. Starlink already generates real revenue that funds SpaceX's R&D. China's constellations are years from that cash flow. And SpaceX is valued at $1.75 trillion, a war chest capable of sustaining competition for a very long time. So what is the actual problem? It is not that SpaceX is losing. It is that SpaceX is about to face what it has never had: a peer competitor with unlimited state backing and an industrial base that does not know how to do things slowly. SpaceX's competitive advantage has always been a loop. Fly more, learn more, iterate faster, cut costs, fly more. For a decade, nobody else was inside that loop. Now 10 Chinese companies are entering it simultaneously. China built 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in 15 years. They became the world's largest EV market almost overnight. When China decides to industrialize something, they do not just compete, they flood the market. The counter-argument deserves to be said clearly. Most of these companies are still burning cash at rates that would be alarming anywhere else. Land space has lost over $500 million. Profitability is projected at least 5 years away. The reusability gap is enormous, and closing it requires failure after failure before the breakthrough. China's capital markets are also running hot. Some of this IPO momentum may be early investors trying to exit, not a reliable signal about technology maturity. The honest answer is that this is a race, and the finish line is not 2026. The real inflection point comes in 2027 and 2028, when we will actually see whether any Chinese company has achieved routine reusable launches. If they do, the economics of the global launch market shift dramatically and permanently. What happens next? Here is the scenario that Western aerospace analysts are losing sleep over, and nobody is reporting on it clearly. If even 2 or 3 of these companies achieve reusable flight by end of 2026, the global launch market splits in 2. On one side, SpaceX, with the best technology, the most experience, and a revenue base that sustains further development. On the other side, a Chinese industrial ecosystem offering cheaper launches, state-backed pricing, and a diplomatic alternative for countries that do not want their critical infrastructure running through American hands. For Western governments and companies, that creates a genuinely difficult choice. Pay SpaceX's prices for proven reliability, or take a cheaper deal from China and absorb whatever geopolitical complications follow. The timeline: 2026. First successful Chinese booster recovery. The moment the economics become real. Look, the story of 10 at once is not really about rockets. It is about what happens when the world's largest manufacturing economy decides that space is an industry, not a science project. SpaceX disrupted Boeing and Lockheed Martin by treating rockets like cars, manufactured, iterative, profitable at scale. China is trying to do to SpaceX what SpaceX did to them, by treating rockets like trains. And they have more train builders than anyone else on the planet. Whether they succeed is one of the most consequential technological questions of the next decade. Subscribe to stay ahead of this story, because this channel covers the developments that mainstream tech media consistently misses. Turn on notifications, updates are coming fast, and drop a comment below. Do you think any Chinese company will catch SpaceX before Starship is fully operational? I read every single one. I will see you in the next one.